Hi everyone, welcome back to the AI ML roadmap series. And currently we are discussing Python fundamentals. Until now we have covered these topics. So we have talked about Python basics and what is Python, why we use Python, and how it is beneficial, right? Next we talked about some thing called Python variables and some data types, in which we talked about int, float, string, and boolean. Next, we also discussed some data collection, which were tuples, list, sets, Frozensets, and dictionary. We also touched upon the different Python operators that we have, assignment, logical, and so on. Right? We also talked about how we can use the range function, and we talked about how to work with iterators and how to create your own iterator as well. Right? Then we discussed about the if-else statements. We talked about loops, how they work, two types of loops, for while loop. Then we talked something about try and except, and then we talked about how we can take input from the user, right? Next, we also discussed about something called Python functions, which is how we can create modularity in Python. So something we have called functions, right? We also talked about lambda functions, we talked about recursions, we talked about generators and decorators. Similarly, we also talked about how to create Python modules. We discussed that there are three types: built-in modules, external modules, and custom modules, right? We also discussed some built-in modules like datetime, math, JSON, and regex, right? Also, we also talked about what is pip, how you can work with it, how we can install, uninstall a package, how we can check whether a particular library exists or not, right? Then we talked about how we can create a virtual environment. Virtual environment is an isolated environment, so that it can, like, we can configure our environment for our project needs, right, without hampering the rest of the machine. Okay, so till now we have discussed all of these things, but today we'll try to solidify these features, whatever we have discussed so far, with a project. Okay, so today what we'll be building is, we will be building a project called Hogwarts Student Portal. So I hope everybody knows about Harry Potter, and if you don't, so it's like a magical school where people can do magic, and it's a school from magical children. So, right, so if you don't know, you can just Google it, like Harry Potter, and you'll get the context. Okay, so today what we are going to do, we are going to create a student portal basically. Okay, so if you don't know about like Hogwarts, just you can consider it as a student portal. Okay, so what features we will be building is, we will be creating a command line Hogwarts student portal that can, like, add new students. It can list how many students are there. It can store and manage marks of the students. It can calculate average and assign grades. Okay, then we can also identify some sorry and then we can also identify some failing students, show class statistics, and save and load all data using JSON, right? We remember we learned about the JSON library, so we'll also see like how we can work with it. Okay, so the goal of this project, so why we are doing it. So till now we have we have talked about a very theoretical side of these features. Till now, we have seen some examples, but now we are seeing how we can implement it for a real time project, right? So after you will build this project, you will understand what we are doing, so you will have a functional understanding of how these things work, right? Okay, so we'll start with a very first step, which is, we'll just create a menu with three options, right? Add student, list students, and exit. Okay, for example, like you go for example, you go for an admission. Okay, so you either you get yourself registered, or maybe you can ask that how many students are there, or you can get their details, right? In the similar way, we are just creating a simple menu. So let's start. Okay, so let's create a function called def print menu, something like this. And what I want is I just want to print something like this, for example. Okay, so what I want, option 1 is add student, right? Second, what I want is an option for list students. Okay, and third, let's say option 2, exit this function. Okay, exit this function. Now what I'll do, let me just add some decorative around it and just mention like Hogwarts Student Portal. Okay, something like this, right? And just add some, yeah. So if you run it, let's quickly run it and see how it will look. So you'll have something like this. Okay, once I run it, it's not printing anything. Let's try again. Okay, yeah, the issue is I haven't. Yeah, I think it should work. Let's see what happens. Let's see if it works or not. Okay, so the issue was is the indentation. Okay, so now if I run it, it will work, right? So if I select 1, it will give me the option to add a student. If I select 2, it will give me the option to list a student and exit, right? If I click 3, it will exit. Okay, so let's now create a main function. Okay, so how we can define it is something like def main, and we'll say that we'll do something like, if let's say I'll take a choice. Okay, choice equals to, let's say, input. So first what we'll do, I'll just print this menu. Okay, next I'll ask to mention that enter the choice. Okay, and now based on this choice, for example, if choice equals to 1, then it should do something, right? It should do like adding, but for now we are just creating a skeleton, right? So let's say print add student function will go here, right? Something like this. Or we have like elif, if choice equals to let's say 2, right? Then what we need, I want to do the list. So similar, I'll create a placeholder that will say something like list students function will go here. Okay, and if choice equals to 0, then what I'll do, I'll just, let's say, print exit. Okay, now let's try to run this. Okay, let's try to run this. Okay, so it will ask me a choice. So let's say I mention 1. See, it just mentioned this and it exit the function. Okay, now what if I want to make it as a recurring, until the user say exit, it will keep asking for the choice. So how I could do it is, I could do something like this. So I print the menu, then what I'll do, I'll just call a while loop. So we know, right? So how while loop work is we need to mention a condition. So till I have 1, so 1 is basically, or I could just mention while true, what will happen, it'll ask for a choice, and if it is 1 it is 2, and it is, if it is 0, then it will exit. And let's say an else, which says something like print invalid choice, and let's say try again, right? Something like this. So now if I run it, so let's see what happens. So it asks me a choice, so let's say I say 1, it again prompt me. Let's say I say 2, it again prompt me. Let's say I say 3, it again prompt me. Or let's say I say 0, it again prompt me. But what should happen? Like when I say exit, it should exit this loop, right? So what I need to do is I need to enter something called a break, right? We talked about, right? So now let's run it. So if I do something like, okay, just give it a minute. Okay, if I do something like this and I say, let's say 3, so what it will, sorry, let's say 0, what it will do, it will exit. Okay, so let me also correct, it should be 0 instead of, okay, now let's go. So I have a portal which is saying if you click on 1, 2, 3. So if I do 1, it will say something like add function will go here, but this choice is still there, right? If I something less than say 5, so it's a invalid choice, you should choose between these, right? So now I'll do something like, if I do something like 0, it will now exit. Okay, so this is how you can create your menu, right? Okay, okay, so this is good, right? So this is how we can test it basically. Okay, now next step what we want is add the student function. Okay, so step 2 is will store a student. So how we can do it, let's create a grade book, right? So what we need to do, okay, yeah, okay, so next what we need to do is we need to add a student, right? Because that's what we have in our, let me quickly, yeah, so let's start with the first functionality, which is add a student. So let's see how we can do that. So to add a student, I need to define something, right? So how we are going to implement it, we are going to create a global gradebook. So if we create a global, we talked about if we create a variable as global, so it can be accessible everywhere, right? So let's start with that. So what we'll do, we'll just simply create a global gradebook. Okay, gradebook, and we'll do something like gradebook equals to empty, right? This is how we can initialize a gradebook. Now what I want is I want to, yeah, so for each student is a dict with a name, roll number, house, mark, actives, right? So for adding, let's say I create a function add student, right? So I need these details, right? So I'll have need something like name, so I'll do input, so I'll say enter student name, right? I'll have something called roll number, is something like input, let's say enter roll number. I need something like a house. So house is something, so whenever you get an admission in a school, you got divided into some houses, right? Some internal houses. So same in Hogwarts, we have 4 houses. So the houses, let's create these houses. So it has a like a defined houses. So it has 4, which one is Gryffindor, next is Ravenclaw, next we have is Hufflepuff, and the last we have a Slytherin. Okay, now so we have defined a set, right? Because they are unique, and also we know the house is something that is not going to change ever, right? So I could also define it as a frozen set, sorry, right? So I'll just typecast it to a frozen set. Okay, yeah. So now let's take the house as an input. So input enter house, right? And I'll give enter house, choose from this. Okay, now I'll say something like houses. Makes sense? Or we have also talked about how we can use f strings, right? I could say something like f, like it's is a f string, formatting string, and I could just say something like this, right? So I have asked for a house, for number, for a name, roll number, house, right? Now next we have something called marks. So how I will take it? We'll define some subjects. So whenever you take a class, you have some subjects, right? So let's define those subjects. So in subjects we have like portions, like in reality, in the real world, we have subjects like math, English, science, etc. Similar in Hogwarts, we have subjects like potion, charms, defense against dark arts. Okay, let's just take only these 3. Okay, so now I want to take the marks, which is a dictionary, right? Because the marks should be in all these subjects. Okay, so I'll define my marks as a dictionary. Then what I'll do, I'll loop through the subject and I'll take and register the marks for each subject, right? So how I can do it is, for subject in subjects, right? I could, for each one I could ask the score, right? Score equals to input if marks in something called sub, right? Now I'll ask the user mark for each subject, and what I'll do, I'll keep adding that mark to this marks dictionary, something like this: marks sub equals to score, right? So by the end of it, I'll have a marks dictionary which will have the marks of the student in each of these subjects, right? So this is how I could create the marks. Next, yeah, so okay, yeah, so next to we have is an active and a created add. So active is something, so whenever I'll going to add a student, so he will be active, right? He will be active. And next we have something called a created at, okay, which is a timestamp. Also, if you see here, what we are saying, that name is a string type. So we know, so whenever we take an input from whenever input from the user using this input function, it automatically gets as a string format. But you see, the roll number should be int, so for this one we need to typecast it. We need to do something like this, right? Similarly, house should be a string, so no worries. So house is already like this, right? Next we have something called, yeah, so marks. So marks can be in float, right? So we'll do a typecasting here of float. Okay, so this is how we have created our student. Now the next step is we'll add it. Next is we'll create a student dictionary, okay, for each student. So we'll have something like student equals to, we have a name, right? Then we have roll number, this variable. Next we'll have something called a house, which is this, right? Next we'll have something called marks, which is this, right? We have stored as a dictionary. Next we'll have something called active, active, which should be true, right? Because right now we are at the very start of just adding a student, right? And next we'll have something like a created at. So the moment this student is added, so created at. Okay, so how we can do the created at? We can do something like created at, we remember we talked about something called a datetime module, right? So using that we can do something like, we can import the datetime module and we can simply take the date, right? So I could do something like datetime dot datetime dot now, right? So yeah, this works. So I'll just do it, add it here, right? And what I'll do, I'll just append this student to this grade book, right? So how I can do it is, I can do something like gradebook dot append and this student, and let's print it as well. So print our student. Okay, so this is how we can create a student. So what we have discussed, so a global grade book, so that we can store the students information here. Then we have created for every add student, I have created these student with these details, right? And I added this student dict to the grade book, right? So that it is accessible throughout, right? So now let's quickly check it. So how we can call it, we could just do this, we can say something like, yeah, and let's call it. So enter student name, let's say I say Harry Potter. Okay, next it asks for a roll number, let's say 101. Next it asks me for the house, let's say I say Gryffindor. Okay, and next is asked for marks in portion, let's say 10, marks in charm, I say 10, marks in defense, I say art. So you see, it says that the student is added with these details. But if you see something here, that then this house name is incorrect, right? It should be something like this, so which is incorrect. So what we need to do, we need to add a check. So what we can do something like here. We can add a check here. So what I could do, okay, so let's do something like, so I could say if house in this houses, okay, else it should take unknown. For example, remember we talked about how we can define the if string in a single line, so we are doing something like that. Also, if you see for the created at date time, so this is a very weird format, right? So let's format it. So I could use something like we could do something like dot ISO format, for example. So right, so what it will do, it will convert this from a date time format to a string, because created at is a string. Okay, so now let's quickly rerun it and verify. So let's say my student name is Harry Potter, roll number is 101, choose house from, let's say I say ABC, for example, marks in portion 10, charms 20, 30. Okay, so now you see the house is unknown, and if you see the created is a good format, right? I could see, so when it was created on 25th, and what time? This time. Okay, so this is how we can add a student. So what if I need to add one more student? So I need to call it again, right? So now what we are going to do, remember we have created our list, right? So what we'll modify it to call the student function. Okay, we could do something like, we'll modify it to call our function. So when the choice is 1, we should do, instead of this, it should now just calling the add student function. So calling the function like this. Okay, so what I'll do, I'll just call this function now. And also let's verify it to mention that student added with details, let's say something like this. Okay, something wrong, yeah. Okay, so now when we run this runner, this main block, so it will ask me for option. Now we have a functionality for choice 1. So let's try it. So let's say I say 1, and yeah, it's asked me to add. So let's say I say Harry Potter, roll number is 101, choose the house. So let's say I say Gryffindor, marks in portion say 10, charms 10, and this one are 10, right? So you see, so it says that student added with details this, है ना? Now let's say I want to add another student. For example, I'll say something like 2, and I want to add, let's say I want to add Ron Weasley, and okay, so I need to add the choice which is 1, right? So I want to add, let's say, Ron Weasley, enter roll number, say 102, choose the house, this is Gryffindor, marks in portion 8, 7, and this is 6, and you see the student is added, right? So this is how we can add the students, right? Now next, this is how we can add multiple students, right? Next, let's we have a function called a like we have a choice called a list student. So whatever students we have add, I want to list it. Okay, with that will also create two more function, which is calculating the average of the marks, and based on those marks I'll assign some grades. Okay, so now what will we do, we will be creating a function which is like doing the average. Okay, so how we can do it is I could just simply say calculate average, and what it will have marks, right? I need all the marks to create the average. And where we are storing the marks, we are storing the marks in the this marks dictionary, right? If you remember, we are storing it in the marks dictionary, right? So now I have passed the dictionary here, and what I'll do, I'll simply perform the average, right? So let's say, yeah, so how I could do it, I could simply say yeah, how I could do is I could simply say, let's say total value equals to sum of marks dot values, right? Remember, I could do this, you know, mark those values. What it will show me, it will show me all the values of this mark dictionary, right? And what I'll do, I'll just simply sum it, right? And then what I am going to do, I'll create the average, which is average equals to total divided by the count, right? So how I can do it is I could simply do length of marks, right? And I have created the average. So let's quickly verify it. Let's say I have a marks dictionary, which is something like portion 10 portion comma 10. What else we had? Yeah, this is charms. Let's take this one. Okay, let's say we have a dictionary called this. Let's take the same dictionary and let's create the average of it. Okay, now let's call it. Let's see what's the answer. So it should print me 10, right? Because 10 10 10 average should be 10, right? Works, right? Next I want to assign grade, so I'll create a def assign grade function, and what it should have, it should have the average, right? On the basis of average I could assign the grade. So I'll have something like average. So let's decide something like, so if average is greater than or equal to 90, so I'll say the result is outstanding. If it is something is average is greater than equals to 75, I'll say result is exceeds expectations. Okay, let's say if the average is greater than 60, then the grade is acceptable, for example. Okay, and the last, okay, so let's add one more. If average is greater than equals to 40, let's say the grade is poor, and finally, like whatever less than x 40 will say it is a fail, right? The grade is fail. Now let's test it. So how we can test it? So I'll pass the grade. I could just simply call it. Let's say the grade is grade is 100. Okay, for example. Okay, something wrong. Okay, yeah. So works, right? So this is how we can work with it. Well, if I'll say something like 80, it should say exceed expectation. So right, so we have created both the methods. Next, it says that create a basic list student method that will print each student with average and grade. Okay, so how I could do it? I could simply create a function def list underscore students, and I just need to print it, right? So if you remember, while creating the add student function, I am adding the student to the gradebook, right? Gradebook list, which is a global variable, so it is accessible throughout my workspace, right? So what I'll do, I'm simply going to loop through it, right? So I'll do something like for student in grade book, right? What I need to calculate the average first, right? So I could say something like average equals to, I'll call this method, right, call average, and what I need to call it on the marks, right? So I could say something like this, है ना? Works. Now if you see, this calculate average method is not returning anything, it's just printing. So we need to modify it to, instead of print, to return the average. Okay, this is how we can return the average. Next, we need to print the grade as well. So we have calculated the average. Now from the average I could call the assign grade method, right? So grade would be assign grade method, and I need to pass this average, right? So I'll have the grade and this. Now I just need to print. So what I need to print, I'll take a string formatter, and what I need to print, I need to print the details of the student. So I could simply do student, let's say name is student name, right? And k name, right? Then let's also print his roll number, and student what is it, roll number, right? And let's also print the house of the student. So house of the student is house, right? And list also, now we have to, I think we have couple more, the dict student contains couple more, so we have printed names, roll number, house. So let's not print mark because we are already created the average and the grade. So yeah, so let's print the name and some details, and the let's only print the student name, roll number, house, and the grade, average, which is average, right? And the last I need is the grade, average marks, and next we have is the grade, right? So grade also we have calculated, something like this. Okay, so this is how we can implement the list student method. Okay, so now let's try to print it. For example, let's try to test it, what will happen. So if I do something like this, see, this is printing me the 2 students, right? And if you see, grade is failed because I have assigned the marks from out of 10, right? So this is how you can do it. Now let's combine everything whatever we have learned till now. Okay, so let's do something like, let's combine everything. So yeah, so we have created a main menu. Okay, so we have created a main menu. We have created a add function somewhere. Yeah, we have created a add function. We have created a add function. Then we have created our, what did we create? We have created our this, the thing that we created at the latest. We have created the average and the sorry, we have created the average, assign, and the list methods, right? Let's quickly mention those here as well, right? And now let's call our let's call our caller method, which is this one, right? This main method. So now, yeah, okay, so now we have true. One, we have student choice list, so I could just simply call that the calling the list function, right? So I could simply say something like this, right? So now let's test it. Okay, now if I run it, so it will say enter the choice. So let's say I say first 2. So you see, it will show me empty because I have reset this global variable, right? So it will be empty. Now let's add a student. For example, I'll say add a student 101, Harry Potter. Okay, something wrong. Okay, yeah, sorry, roll number I missed. Okay, yeah, so if I say list, it will show me nothing. If I say now 1 again, it will ask me a student name. So let's say Harry Potter. Roll number, let's say 101. House is Gryffindor. Marks in portion, let's say 89, 86, 98, and let's try to list it. So if I say second, so it will list me, right? Harry Potter student this, average marks this, and grade is outstanding. Let's try to add one more student. Let's say I'll add Ron Weasley. Roll number, let's say 102. Choose from the house, Gryffindor. Marks in portion, let's say 76, 67, 87, and let's see, I want to list the students. So if you see, now it is showing me 2 students. Okay, similarly you can add no matter how many students you want, and it will keep on listing, right? So now let's just try to exit. See, so till now what we have learned how to create a skeleton, like a simple menu. Then we try to add the data using the add student model. Then there we have created a global grade book. Then we have created some houses, sub subject. Then we created our student, right? And we created our student dictionary and we added it to our grade book, right? Then we embedded this add method to our main menu and we tested out, right? Next we talked about how we can uh, add the calculate method and the grade method, and how we can combine these methods in a third method, which is list students, and how to print the values, right? and this is an overall method that we have checked. So we have seen how we can do, how we can add a student, then how we can list it, and also we have seen how we can add multiple students and list it, right? And how we can exit a menu basically. Okay, so next will, as you see that this roll number is an integer, this average is the float values or something like that. So for example, let's call this method again, like this main method again, and see what happens. So if I do something like this, I'll say something like one add, and I'll add a student, let's say Hermione, and I add a roll number as something like this. You see it is showing me an error, right? Because that in this d is not a integer, right? So now what if I want to like reprompt the user every time until he enters a valid roll number, right? So how we can do it is we'll implement something called a safe int and a safe float that will keep asking the user until he enters a valid input, right? So let's try to implement it, and then we'll just replace these into our student method. So let's do something like that. Okay, so I'll create safe int. It will take the number which is entered by the user, right? So I'll just add a try block, right? I'll add a try block which will just return it as a int of number. If there is some issue similar to this, what it should do, it should do a except let's say value error, and what it should do, it should print value error, because the value, this is the right error name, value error. So it should print, and it should say something like please enter a valid integer, right? Something like this, and we'll just reprompt it, number equals to input, right? Something like that. Now we want to reprompt it, so we need to mention a loop. So for example, I need to mention something like while 1. Okay, now let's see what happens. So whenever I'll enter this function, it will directly enter this while loop. It will try to convert it to an int. If it is successful, then it will just return the value, right? It will exit this while loop and it will exit this main function basically. Otherwise it will it will raise an error with this method, and it will retake the number. It will keep prompting. So let's quickly verify it. For example, I have mentioned something like this ABC. So let's see how it will work. See, it reprompted that please enter a valid number, or I could say something like that is not an integer, please value a valid integer. Okay, so let's try to rerun it. See, ABC is not an integer, please enter a valid integer. So let's say I'll enter 12 and see, it will exit. This is how similar way I could create for the safe float, right? So I'll simply do this safe float, and instead of this I'll say this, that float is not a number, please enter a valid number. Okay, similarly if you can test it as well. You could simply say this, and I'll call out this number. Okay, now if I mention something like 1 2 3 5 6, this is a valid number, right? Now second step, what we need to do is need to replace the int and the float method with these new created methods in our add student function. So let's quickly copy. Yeah, let's quickly do this. Quickly modify it. We just need to do something like safe underscore input, safe underscore int, and safe underscore float, right? So let's quickly test it. Let's see whether it works or not. So I call my main method, which is printing the main menu. So I'll do something like this, right? So let's see. So let's quickly just print the existing list first. So it has like two students, Ron, Potter. So let's try to add one more. Let's say I'll add something called Hermione. Say Hermione, enter a valid choice. So I need to add a 1, right? So I'll add a student name, which is Hermione. Let's say in roll number I mistakenly added a string. See, is GD is not an integer, please enter a valid integer. So I'll add something like 103. Make sense? Now enter house. Let's select Gryffindor. Again, marks in portion. Let's say something like this. So it will throw me an error. So I need to mention, let's say 98, 99, 89. See, now if I do the listing, it will work, right? So this is how we can reprompt our user. Okay, now if you see, let's try to add one more user, one more student. So let's say I add Snape, who is not a student. So let's say I'll add Snape and I'll mention 103, and I'll check Slytherin, portion 78, 87, 89, and if I see second, you see that this roll number is repeated, right? So similar how we did for safe int, safe float, we could also create similar thing for while we are taking the roll number. Like we can also add something called, let's say, validate roll. Similarly, what if I want to do for validating roll number, so that there should be no duplicate roll number? So how I could do it, I could just create a similar fashion. So I could just do something like this. So validate roll number, it will have my roll number. Then I will create a roll number list from my grade book, right? Something like this. Then I'll do a while loop, something like this, right? So let's try to print this roll number list as well. Then I'll create a indefinite loop and I'll see if it is not there, then it's fine, otherwise it should reprompt. Okay, let's see how it will work. So let's say I mentioned 103, so it already exists, right? So it reprompt. Now if I mention something like 10, so it will work, right? So now we'll embed it in our add function and let's verify it. Okay, quickly. So quickly list 2, it already has, so we cannot remove it for now. So let's add. Okay, so let's try to remove it first. So let's try to exit 0 and let's try to remove it. So how we can remove it, we can remember, so this grade book is a list, right? So we can do something like grade book dot remove, right? So I see what happens. So it will throw me, take exactly one argument. So what I want to remove, I'll just say mention pop. See, it removed the last one. Now let's recall it. So let's try to list first. So see, it will only have 3, 1, 2, 3. Now let's try to add. So if I say, let's say Snape. Now if I try to add a roll number, let's say 103 or 102, for example. See, 102 already exists, please choose a new one. So these are the ones that exist, so I need to choose a new one, so it works. Okay, So this is how you can avoid the duplicate roll number. Okay. Marks in portion. Say if I say something like this, it will throw an error. 98. Also, you could also mention for, let's say, for marks. So you could also say that the marks should be between 1 to 100. So for example, if I try to add something like this, so it will also work, but so this is not a valid marks, right? So you could add similar function for the for the marks as well, to validate whether the marks, you can take it as an homework validate marks should be between 0 and 100, for example. Okay, so yeah. Okay, so we have learned how we can do try and accept, right? We remember we talked about it in quite a length in our previous sessions. So this is how you could do it. We have also checked how you can check whether there are duplicates or not, right? Next we'll talk something about regex, right? For example, validate student name. When we are doing an add object, when we are doing an add student, we are mentioning a name, right? So what if I mention something? So let's try to run it again. Mean, for example, this. So if it's so let's try to do this quickly. So I have, so let's try to add one more. So let's say I add a name, something like, so it will add it, but this is not a valid name, right? But it will still add it. So how we can avoid it? We could, yeah, how we can avoid it? So let's quickly see. So let me just quickly see. If you see, it will show you the add some name, something like this, but this is not a valid way. So now what we can do, we can also make sure that a name is using proper pattern. So how we can do it? We can use it do it using a regex pattern. Okay, so make sure that it only contains letter or a space. For example, Harry space Potter, something like that. Okay, we could also have an additional method called add an email as well. So let's see how both will work. Okay, so let's try to add a method first. Def validate name, validate name. So what name? So what I'll pass as a parameter should be name, right? And what I'll check whether it's a valid one or not, valid name or not. So how we can do it is return bool, for example. So if it is a full match, re dot full match, what it should be, how it should be. So it should either be a, it can start either with a capital or a small, right? So I could say something like A to Z, A to small, sorry, A to Z, A to, and it could also have a space, right? And it could have them one or more than one times, right? You remember we talked about how we can do it, something like this. So this is a pattern we can create, something like this. And how, what on what we need to check it on name. Okay, so if there is a match, it will return true, otherwise it will return false. So let's quickly verify it, and also import our re. Okay, so let's try to validate it. For example, I mentioned something like name. Let's keep it. Okay, full match, missing one required positional argument string. Okay, sorry, so one, okay, Makes sense. So this is an invalid. Let's try with high space Potter. Okay, we have missed something. See, right? Because I mentioned, so if so for example I've said something like this, so if I mention something like this, it would be a true, right? So there is an extra space. Okay, so right now this should be true, right? So let's say if I had mentioned something called, for example, I'll say something like this: validate underscore name, and I say something like this. So it is not a valid name, right? So it should return me false. Okay, so this is how we can validate our name. Similarly, we can also validate our email. If you remember last time we talked about it, how we can validate the email. So pretty simple. Similar way, we'll pass the email, we'll return a boolean, right? And we'll do a full match. So we'll do re dot full match, we'll pass our string, which is email, and in the first half we'll mention the pattern. So pattern could be something like, so yeah, so email is divided into two parts, right? So for example, I'll have an email something called tringlemart@1764, sorry, tringlemart.1456 @gmail.com. So this is a valid email. So how, let's try to create a pattern for it. So you see, so it so the so the data before this @ could be anything, right? So it could be capital letters, it could be, sorry, it could be capital letters, it could be small letters, it could be numeric, we could also have a dot, we could have the underscore, right? And we could have these any number, like we should have like at least one or more, right? Then we need to have this @ after that. Also this, it could be anything, it could be Outlook, it could be something else. So we can create similar pattern for it: A to Z, E to small, it could be numeric, right? Something like that. Then I need a dot for .com. So after that I need I need alpha numeric, it cannot be numeric, right? So need a alpha. So it could be A to Z, it could be small a to Z, right? And it could be a 3-letter like dot edu or dot, we could also have in, but let's say it could be something like this, right? So let's try to work with this pattern and see whether it works or not. Okay, print, let's try to verify first this one because it's a valid one. Okay, sorry. Okay, now let's try to validate it. So it is throwing me an error. Let's see why. So bad character range A to Z. Okay, we made a mistake. Okay, yeah, there should be small z. Okay, so it is false. Why is it false? Okay, yeah, A to Z dot plus any number of times at the rate, something like at the rate. It could be also any number of times, right? So it should be plus dot. Now see, it works. Let's try to check for an invalid one. So let's say I'll have something like this. So this is an invalid one. Okay, so this is how you can add your functionalities. Right now let's try to update a add function. Okay, let's see how we can do it. So this is my add method. Let's quickly copy paste it. And we'll try to verify it. Okay, so here I am taking the name, so I'll do something like if not validate underscore name passed as name. So I'll simply do something like print invalid name. Yeah. And similarly you could do, okay, so similarly we need to mention our email as well somewhere. So let's say here I add one more option, which is to take email equals to input, enter your email. Okay, something like that. Now we could also do the validation for email. So validate email, I'll pass the email here, and if it's not valid, if it like the boolean will return false, it should mention invalid email format. Okay, now let's quickly verify it. So okay, so I think wait, so here while adding the student, let's add email also, so that it reflects in our list students. Okay, so let's quickly update this one as well. Okay, let's quickly verify it. Okay, so let's quickly list first. So right now we have 1 2 3 4 5, and let's add another student. So let's try to add a name which starts with something like this. See, it throws the error, but if you noticed, it did not exit, like it prompted for the next one. But what we just want to exit the menu, so we could do something like this. Okay, something like this. What this will do, it will exit this add function immediately. So let's see. So I'll do something like this, and I'll do something, so right, so it immediately exit the def method and we are back to our menu. Okay, this is how you can go about it. Also, if you remember how we did the safe and safe load, we can reprompt it as well. Like instead of just exiting, we can also reprompt the user for a valid name as well. Okay, so this is how you can use your regex to validate your student name or your email. Okay, now let's try to run it again for a valid student name. Let's try to print for a second. Yeah, let's try to add a user. Okay, let's say Paul. Roll number should be 109, for example. Choose the house, let's say Hufflepuff, and email, let's say paul.@gmail.com. So it looks like a valid one, right? So yeah, 98, 89. See, now if I list it, so here it will, Okay, so if I list it, won't show me. But if I try to print my grade list, so if I try to print my grade book, so it should show me the name poll with the email as well, right? So because our list method is only printing these much, so that's why it is not showing me the email here. But you can, like, you can change it to update email as well, right? This is how you can work with the regex. Okay, it's important because I think in future, like a lot of time, it is important to understand it, because when we have a lot of data, we need to find patterns, right? So to finding patterns, these regex comes very handy. Okay, next we'll talk about something called decorators. If you remember, we talked about how we can work with decorators. So decorators are basically, we are adding some extra functionality on top of our functions, right? So here let's try to create a log action decorator, which will just log which will just log when a function starts or an end. Okay, something like, let's try to do something like this. So let's say I'll create a function log sorry, log action, and what I want to pass it will have a function, right? Then I need to create a inner function, right? And whatever happen, then I'll just need to return this wrapper here, sorry, this inner here. Okay, now what I want from to perform in this inner, I want to simply perform the log action. So basically I want to say that print f string, for example, let's say log we talked about something called function metadata, right? Log func dot name func dot name called at is being called. Okay, something like that, is being called. And after that, what we'll do, we'll just call the function. Okay, whatever function it is. If there is any args, then it will call with the args. Yeah, just simply pass the args and the quarks. For example, if it has some variables or not. Okay, because list student does not have a variable. Okay, student add student does not have a variable, something like that. Okay, quarks. Okay, I'll have something like, just copy paste it. And what I'll do, I'll mention like again same, and I'll say something like log function is done, or something like that. Okay, in that fashion, something like that. Okay, and I'll simply just return this func here. Okay, so what it will do whenever this function, what it will do, it will print this line, and then it will call the main function, and then will just print this line. So let's quickly verify it, how it will work. For example, let's add it on top of our add function, add student method. Okay, now okay, so how we'll work with it, so we'll just remember how we can add it. We just need to mention something like this, right? So let's call it, before we call it in the menu, let's call it here first. Okay, so we have something like this, you know. So let's say if it is working or not. So I'll call add student, Okay, function has no attribute name. Yeah. Okay, so you see, the moment it entered, it goes here and it say log function is being called. So let's say I enter a name, Pauline, roll number 1 on 10, choose house, this say Ravenclaw, email pauline.87@gmail.com, marks in portion something. Let me just add some. See, now it is saying log add function is done, right? This is how you can work with log strings. Okay, should be this. So this is how you can work with log strings. Now let's also modify the other list student function as well. List student function, where is it? Somewhere. Let me quickly find the list student function. Okay, so list student function. Yeah, we'll just add on top of it as well. Now let's call the menu and let's see how it will work. Okay, let's call the menu, and if we do something like this, okay, so let's call it. So first let's see, do second. Okay, think something is wrong. Okay, I need to run it. Now let's call it. So let's try to do number 2 first. See, it says that log list student is being called, and after it displayed the values, it mentioned that log is student is done, right? This is how you can add your decorators. So this is just like a example how you can like perform some logging on top of it. So this is how you can do the decorators. Okay, yeah, apply it to functions like add student, list student, etc. Okay, now let's talk about something called generators. So remember we talked about generators. So we'll create a generator that yield all students whose average is below a threshold. Okay, so that let us stream data instead of building new list. So let's see how we can do it. We'll create a function failing student, def failing student, for example, and let's say create a threshold of 40. So we'll add, let's create a threshold of 40. So what I'll do, we'll just simply for in grade book, so whichever student marks is less than 40 will yield them. Okay, is 40. So if okay, so we need to call the average first. So we'll do something like average equals to, you remember we created this function called calculate average, so we'll call it on marks, right? We'll say if this average is less than this threshold, which is 40, right? This threshold, then it should yield the student, right? Works. Now how we can call the generator is simple. Now let's create a function show failing. So we'll do something like def show failing. What it will do, it will Okay, so what it will do, it will simply yield. So for example, okay, for example, I'll have something called, yeah, so I'll do something like this. For I'll say for student in failing student. Okay, I'll call this method. So this will be a generator, right? And we can start yielding, or we can start like just printing yes, right? So let's say I'll create a flag equals to false, for example, false. Okay, now is it will go for each student which is in this, right? So if it enters this loop, basically that means there is at least one failing student, right? Is equal to, let's uh, change this flag to true, and we'll calculate the average. Average equals to calculate average, and we'll call on top of this s, right, marks. And similarly, how we were doing in the list method, we'll just simply say this. Or if you want, you can add like a custom method message which is like student name with roll number, this field with average score of this, right? Something like this, we can print it. And if this, like if this, okay, wait, okay, s, है ना, s. So yeah, this is how it will work. And if the flag is still false, so if this flag is still false, we can say that there are no failing students, basically, right? No failing students, right? So let's quickly test it. Okay, so let's quickly test it. So right now I think there are no failing students. So when I run it, so it should show me no failing student, right? Now let's embed these in our main method. Okay, so let me just copy paste our main method. So where did we created it last? Somewhere here. No, somewhere. Okay, yeah. So let's update our main method. Yeah. So let's update our main method to say that elif, let's say add it here. Okay, I'll add something like elif choice equals to 3, it should show me the list of failing students, something like this. Okay, works. And let's quickly mention this as well, just so that we are consistent. So, and also let's do one more thing, is add the decorator on top of it as well, log underscore action, right? So I'll do it. So it should say that log, yeah. Now yeah, let's try with this. So if I just quickly, okay, something wrong, 0. Okay, so I also need to update this print menu as well, because this currently does not mention our method. So let's quickly copy paste this as well. Okay, give me a second. Let's quickly update our menu as well. Okay, so we'll update our menu to say that three is show failing students. Okay, show failing students, something like this. Okay, so now when I run it, okay, wait, one more issue, should be 3, sorry. Yeah, so now let's me first try to list students. We have these many students, and now let's try to see the failing student. So you see right now there are not failing students. Let's try to add one. So let's say I'll say something like this. I'll add a John 2. Let's choose the houses Gryffindor, email as @.com. Now let's quickly list it. And now if I see C, now if I say 3, so it should show me John, right? Because if you see John, his average is 21.6, right? And his grade is fail, so it should show me here the student, right? So this is how you can work with generators. Okay, good. Next we'll have something like recursion based stats. So what we'll do, we'll uh, we'll check that how many students are active right now. Okay, so if you see when let's try to print this grade book, we have grade book. You see we created one flag. Give it a second. Okay, sorry, exit. Yeah, so if you see this, we added a flag called active, which is always true, right? But it can be false. Let's say if it is false, that means that the student is maybe checked out from the school, or is not there in the school anymore. Okay, or something like that. So yeah, so now let's try to implement a function. Let's say a function called count active, which will, what it will do, it will count the number of active students. Okay, and we'll have another function called show stat to print total and active students. But for that, let's try to like manipulate this active this grade book to mention. Let's make 2 students inactive. Okay, so let's try to do that first. Okay, so how we can modify it, modify a dictionary, we know that. We'll see something like, let's say we want to modify the last one. Let's see if it works or not. So what is it? So last is the last one, right? So I want to modify the active, so I'll do something like this, and I'll do equals to false, right? And let's see if it works or not. I do something like this, and then I recall this to verify whether it works or not. So let's see what happens. Okay, so till now we have like updated our grade book. So now it has like currently it has 8 elements. So now it should have like 7 elements which are active and 1 which should be inactive, right? So now let's create our function count active to count the number of active students. So let's see how we can do it. So we can do something like this. So index start from 0 index 0 to length. So the moment the index became greater, so it should return 0. Then we have created a current variable where we are mentioning the value as 1 if the student is active, otherwise it should be false, right? It should be 0, sorry, it should be 0. And then I am creating a recursive condition which is adding this current to count active again with the index added as 1, right? So the moment the index got similar to the length, so it should return 0. Okay, so now let's quickly verify it. So right now in a grade book there are total of 8 students, and the active is 7, because if you remember we have inactive one of them. Yeah, so this is how you can create your recursive how you can create your recursion, right? This is how you can embed your recursion in a function. Okay, now let's create another function which is called show stats. What it will do, it will just print the number of active and the inactive students basically. So let's do show stats, something like this. And what it will do, it will take, let's say, total of length of grade book, something like this. And what it will do, it will call this count active, right? Count underscore active, and we'll call it on the grade book, because if you remember, we defined this grade book as a global variable, so it is accessible throughout, right? So now what we'll do, we'll just print total students. We have, let's say, let's make it a formatting string. Total students, let's say we have total, right? And then we'll something called print f string. We have like active students, which is active, right? We can also print our non-active students, which would be simply non-active student, which will be simply your total minus active, right? So this is how we can print the stats. Okay, so now let's modify our main method, the menu and the main method, to include this show stats method. Okay, so let's quickly do that, and we'll have something like this. Sorry, I'm added at the wrong place. So we'll have something like this. Also, let's add our decorator on top of it, right? So we'll have something like log underscore action, right? So yeah, so let's quickly correct. We'll add one more, which is, let's say, 4, which is like show stats. Okay, here also we'll add something called, let's say it will be elif choice equals to 4. So what I need to call is this show stats method. Okay, so I'll do something like this, and I'll also, let's say, print it, or if you don't want to, don't do it. Okay, I'll do something like this, and let's quickly verify it. Okay, now let's quickly do second, let's quickly do third. It should also print 1, and let's quickly do like the stats 4. So it should print, okay, there's some name error, show stat is not defined. Okay, the reason being because we never run this. Okay, now let's try again one more time. So 2 and right, and 3 should show me 1, and for 4 it should show me the total student, which is 8, active 9, active 7. So 8 minus 7, 1 should be non-active. So this is how you can include your recursions in your program, right? Okay, so this is how you can create a grade book with all the different features we talked about. We have created variables, we have created functions, we have created generators, we have talked about how we can use recursions, and using try catch and everything, right? So this is how we can do it. Now next is something called JSON save / load. We talked about how we can convert our string to JSON, right? We talked something like so if a equals to, I have a string called something like this. Hi there. Okay, if I try to print this a and print the type of it, I'll have something like this, right? It is a string. Now how to convert this string to a JSON? So we remember we talked about something called import JSON. We talked about something called JSON dot loads, and we just mention our string. So loads, S means string. Okay, so something like, there's an error. Why is that? Invalid control character at okay, let's name it as string 1. Okay, yeah, so what is wrong is we missed this. Okay, see, now if we print the type of it, it will be something called a dict, right? So this is how we can load a JSON and we can dump a JSON too, right? Now next topic is JSON save slash load. So here let's not discuss it today because it will require using files IO operations. So we'll discuss this with our next batch, right? We'll talk about it later. Okay, so till now we have a program that looks something like this. So right, this is something, it is something like this. Okay, let me just quickly see what happened. Main print menu. Okay, wait. Okay, so this is something like we have at the moment. So at the top we defined a gradebook as global, then we created some houses, some subject, then we import something, then we create a decorator, then we create a add method, which is like adding the student, and they're also adding the student to the gradebook, right? Then we have created a list student, which is listing the student with average and their grade, right? Then we have created some safe and safe font and validate roll number for our add student method, right? Then we created a method called calculate average, assign grade for our list student method, right? Now next we created a failing student to check. We created a failing student generator, which is like creating a generator for all the students less than whose average is less than this threshold, right? Now next we have created the show failing function, which is using this generator to print the number of the failing students, right? Next we have created a function, recursive function count active, which is counting the number of active students that we have right now using recursion. So we have created a base condition and we have created a recursive condition, right? Then we have created a function show stats, which is like printing the number of active, non-active and total students, right? So this is how we have created our final project. In the last session we talked about, whatever the features, whatever the concepts we talked about, we have implemented them all except JSON, which we have discussed briefly, but for the detailed one we required input IO. So we'll talk about that in the next project session. So I hope this projects come handy to you and it will work good for you, right? So yeah, that's how you can work with it. Okay, yeah, thank you everyone, and I'll, yeah, bye, see you in the next session.